Hi friends, today we are back again with marketing management. So in today's live session, we are going to discuss an important area, that is services marketing. So before going in detail of service marketing, today in beginning, I am giving you a question so that here is the question. You have to give the answer for this question based on our discussion. And you have to give your answers in the comment box. So the question is, who is known as boundary spanners? You have options: A, supervisors; B, consumers; and C, frontline employees; and D, backstage or support employees. So from our discussion in today's live session, you have to correctly give the option in the comment box. This is only a simple activity. So let's start. Service marketing. So friends, we have already learned the traditional marketing mix and its importance. But when it comes to services like the banking services or the stockbroking services, etc., these all are services. So for marketing a service, the activities done by a marketer is much more complicated. Why? Because like a physical good, like automobile, like a biscuit, these are physical goods or simply goods. Like these goods, we cannot market services. Why? Because there are special characteristics for the services. So today we are going to learn the very basics of services marketing. And please understand, we are not going in detail. The main thing we have to understand is that the basics of services marketing, and there is a term called the service quality gap model. These two main things are going to discuss in this live session. So let's start. So as I told, for services, the features of services are very distinguished compared to a physical good. Because you just remember about services like a banking services or hairdressing services provided by a barber. In such an services, you cannot see the services. You sometimes may felt that services. So intangibility is a property of services. There are more other features for services, and that is why we have additional 3 P's for services, and we call this as service marketing mix. That is why we have already learned the 7 P's of service marketing mix. And this 7 P's of service marketing mix, as we already discussed, is introduced by Booms and Wittner in 1981. So this 7 P's means this include the traditional 4 P's, that is product, price, place, and promotion. And it also includes additional 3 P's. These additional 3 P's are included. Why? Because in order to catch the properties of a services. So the first distinguishing P of service marketing mix is physical evidence. As we know, if you take a service like hairdressing service, in that hairdressing services, we have no tangible evidence for like a physical good. So only tangible evidence for that hairdressing services is that there is in a barber shop there is a scissors, there is powder, and many other materials or components required for the service operations. So that is known as physical evidence, or in technically we call it as service scape. Once again, this physical evidence we again technically call it as service scape. Service scape simply means the physical evidence or the physical environment in which the services are offered. Another example I can give, take the case of bank. Banks are offering financial services. In there, the branch offices, its furnishing, its seats, its pens, documents, etc. These all are the service scape or physical evidence of the service offered. So that is the first P of additional service marketing mix. Then come the processes, or simply the process. That means all those activities, tasks, procedures which are involved in order to deliver a service. For instance, take the case of banking services. you are giving or you are getting a check facility from a bank. So for giving a check leaf to you or a checkbook to you, there are certain application form you have to fill. The employee in the bank has to give that check leaf. He has to record it in their documents, etc. So these all procedures involved in the process activity. Then come the people. That is very important. People element in service marketing mix means the employees or the service providers who give or deliver the services. So please remember, the people element in the service marketing mix means all those people or human resources are acting or playing a role in delivering a service. So it may include the front office employees, or it may include the backstage employees too. So let's technically learn what a service is. This is a typical definition for a service. A service is any act or performance one party can offer to another that is essentially intangible and does not result in ownership of anything. Its production may or may not be tied to a physical product. So this is a somewhat complete definition. A service is an act or performance. Take the case of hairdressing service. It is a performance, it is a deed. So this performance can be transferred from the service provider to the end consumer. So by just transferring a performance or a hairdressing service, there is not actually a movement of ownership like in physical product. In physical product, we know that by selling a automobile, actually the product, ownership of the product is going to the end consumer or the customer. While in the case of service, the transfer of ownership is not taking place. Why? Because it is just a performance. Take the case of hairdressing service itself. Here you are sitting in a bench or sitting in a chair. You are giving lotions and you are giving scissors, and he is operating with your hair. So this seat, this lotion, these all equipments are within ownership of the service provider. You cannot own. You are getting only certain deed or operation from that equipments. So that is why if services can be tied with a physical product, may or may not be. There are certain services which cannot be tied with a physical product, like in hairdressing. For instance, take the case of consultation given by stockbroking or stockbroker. Here, only thing is their service. No physical product is aiding or helping that service provider. So this is typically a service means. So now we are going to learn the features of services. Already we learned many features. We are just recapping that. A service can be intangible. That means you cannot see or you cannot felt the presence of service, such a product. For example, take the case of hairdressing, or you can take another example that is more efficient way. If a surgeon has done a surgery in your heart, actually after that service is provided, you cannot see what surgery has been taken place in your body. Something you get a felt or you get a perception about the services provided. So here, according to or in comparison to a physical product, the tangibility element is very, very limited for services. So the marketer's stake is that a service marketer has to provide certain physical evidences in many forms. For example, the doctor can have physical evidence like he has a stethoscope, he has instrument for diagnosis, etc. So making a physical evidence in order to get confidence of the end consumer is very important as part of a service provider. Then come the inseparability. Inseparability means whenever the services is produced, in that time itself, the consumption is taking place. So selling and purchasing is not taking place in different two times. Sorry, the production and consumption is not taking place in different two times. It is happening simultaneously. So when a doctor is giving a surgery, actually the production or the process of services is taking place in real time, and the consumption is also taking simultaneously. You cannot separate both the things, the production and the consumption. This property of service is known as inseparability. So due to this inseparability, the marketer is very difficulty, or he is in a dilemma in order to put a apt price for the product, or he is in a dilemma to forecast the demand for a product. So that is known as inseparability. Then comes heterogeneity or variability. Heterogeneity or variability means the services offered by a service provider or a service marketer is varying one. For example, if a barber is hairdressing today in a very good manner, after 1 month, the same consistency may not be get by that service, because by in nature, human has variable behavior. There are various factors affecting the the homogeneity of the service provider. So standardization of a service is very hard to achieve. Why? Because the heterogeneity of the service, because there is a variability in the service provider, because the human nature itself is varying thing. And the time, the place, the person who is providing the service, all these things are affecting the standardization of the service. So that is why variability feature of the service. So the takeaway for marketer is that if the services provider is heterogeneous, in such a situation, the marketer has to provide certain extent of standardization or consistency in the service. Standardization means the services is provided in a consistent way. So for that thing, a improved method of providing services or using newer technology in the services can help. That is why the banks are providing ATM machines or ATM counters in order to provide a consistent uniform services. Then come the perishability. Perishability nature in itself is a very important feature of services. Perishability means as the service is intangible, it cannot be separated for its production and consumption. Due to these all reasons, the service is perishable. You cannot store the service like a physical product. If you have a physical product like a equipment or I have a soap, I have an automobile, these all are physical goods. I can store or inventorize these things. But take the case of services, it is just occurring, the production and consumption is taking place simultaneously. So due to this reason, and also these are intangible. So due to all this reason, the service cannot be stored. For example, a surgeon is offering a surgery operation. So you cannot store this service in anywhere or in a physical storage facility. So that is yet again another property of service. So friends, these are the important 4 features of services. One more additional feature of services is also got an importance, that is lack of ownership. We have already discussed lack of ownership. Take the case of hairdresser. A barber is offering hairdressing facility. Here, you can see in the picture, the customer or the consumer is sitting in a chair. So the property of the service provider include the seat, the scissors, and other materials owned by him. So actually, you are getting only services from these products or the service offered by the barber. You cannot own these properties. Only the services or the legal transaction of the service is taking place. So lack of ownership is yet again another property of service. So now we are going to see the levels of services provided. That means there are different levels in which we can say there is services. So the extreme level or the least extent level of services is known as pure tangible good. So as we see, we have an image of Dettol soap. So Dettol soap is a physical product. So this is a least element. That means here in this physical product, the service element is almost nil. So we can say there is service element is nil, but we cannot say there is no or zero level of services for a physical good like a soap or any other tangible good. I will say why the reason. So the first level is pure tangible good, simply the physical good. So you can see, you can felt, you can use, that the properties of the pure tangible good. Then come a tangible good with accompanying services. So I can give you an example, automobile. While you are purchasing a physical product like automobile, you are getting an accompanying customer service too. So that is why a tangible good with accompanying or supporting services. So while you are purchasing an automobile, you are getting the customer services in the sense of like 1 year free services for repairs, maintenance, etc. So that is the second level of service level. Then come the third form or the third level of services, that is hybrid offering. So friends, please remember, hybrid offering, as the name suggests, there is a hybrid form of services and a physical good. That means there is an equal importance for a physical good as well as the services. Take the case of a restaurant services or simply a dining services. Here a restaurant services has equal importance for the good. Good means, here the good means the food materials provided as well as the services provided by the employees or the service providers in the restaurant. So in hybrid offering, there is equal importance for services as well as the physical product. So that is why it is known as hybrid offering. A restaurant meal is an example for hybrid offering. Then come the fourth level of services, a major service with accompanying minor goods and services. So here you can see an image of air hostess. He is providing services in an aeroplane. So the flights or plane services, the main service is actually the service itself. What is the service they are offering? The transportation of the people through air. So here the main offering is service. In accompanying to that service, they have minor goods and services, like they are offering meal, the air hostess services, etc. So that is why the fourth level of service, that means we have a major service with accompanying certain goods and minor services. So a perfect example is an aeroplane services provided by the flight agencies. Then come the pure service. That means this is the highest level of service. That means there is only service in their offering. For example, a psychotherapist is giving consultancy to the patient. So here the consultancy service is only the element or the offering from the service provider. There is no any other physical product or accompanying minor services, etc. Only pure service. So this is the final stage of services. So my question is a physical good a service? Yes or no? Actually, there is a debate for this topic itself. Because you can see in the slide, a value derived from a physical good is really the services provided by the good, not the good itself. The meaning is that if you take a tablet, an example, a tablet for headache, like paracetamol or Dolo 50, etc. So Dolo, a medicine, is a physical product. It's a medicine for headache. So we can say it is a pure tangible good. But you cannot say it has no services. Why? Because by just seeing that tablet as a physical good has no meaning. Actually, the good is actually this tablet itself is providing certain services. That means by eating that tablet or drinking that tablet, I am getting a service from that tablet. So from the tablet itself, I am getting services. What is the service offering? Ailment of my headache. So you cannot say a good has no services. even a pure tangible good has a element of service, because by just a physical good has no meaning. What the service provided by that tangible or physical good, that's the service or the offering by that physical product. So in a sense, everything we are using or we are consuming is having certain level of services. That is why we have already learned the quality triad of a product, like quality, service, and price, QSP. And remember, there is a word called quality and service and price. So service has very importance in, even though it is a physical good itself, because simply a physical good has no meaning. So this statement is given by actually a award-winning researchers, two researchers like Steve Wargo and Bob Lush. Just for information, I am giving Steve Wargo and Bob Lush. So that was an interesting point. So friends, now we are going to see the service triangle. You can see in the image. Service triangle is very important topic as part of NTA NET. So service triangle suggests there are three types of service marketing, or we can say there are three forms of service marketing. So the first form of service marketing, as you see in the image, a company is offering information and other type of marketing materials to the customer. This flow of material from the company to the customer is known as external marketing. Why it is external marketing? Because a company is offering an external party, the customer, a different forms of marketing material. The marketing material may include the service information, the distributor of the service, the pricing of the service, and all those that service marketing mix. So that is known as the external marketing. So please remember why it is called external marketing, because customer is external to the company and the company is offering their marketing mix or service marketing mix to the end customer in the form of advertisement, promotion materials, etc. Then come the another movement from the company itself to the employees, internal marketing. And we have already learned internal marketing, what it is in holistic marketing. Internal marketing, we have already learned the first customer of the company or a marketer is the employees itself. Because mainly in the case of services, the first customer is employee. Because if the employee is satisfied and delighted, then they can offer high value services. And we know, or we have already learned, the property of service is that whatever the extent or value created by the service provider, that much extent of quality is derived by the customer. So the service provider's quality is very important. So service providers are just the employees of the organization. So the company has to empower their employees in order to give an improved or profitable and valueful services to the customer. So internal marketing is very important. So that is very important concept, mainly in the case of service marketing. So that is why the term internal, because the employees itself, the internal party of the company. Then come the very important part of the service marketing, that is interactive marketing. We have already learned in service marketing, the property of services is that inseparability. That means whenever the service is produced, at that time itself, the product or the service is consumed. So here, the service provider and the consumer has a teamwork in order to perform a valueful service. For instance, if you are getting a hairdressing service from a barber, then in that service, there is actually almost an equal role for the customer as well as the barber. Why? Because what the customer says to the barber, likewise the barber is giving the haircut. For example, I am saying I need a certain type of haircut like a cinema star. So by seeing or by receiving my information, he is haircutting my hair. So there is a teamwork of the service provider as well as the customer. So that is why the term called interactive marketing, because the employee or the service provider and the customer are interacting in order to get a valuable services. So that is why the term interactive marketing. So we can recap these three types of service marketing. When the company is actually offering, actually empowering the employees, then it is known as internal marketing. If the company is giving the promotional messages or its marketing materials to the end customer, then it is known as external marketing. And the employee and the service provider and the customer interact in order to get a fruitful service. So these are the three types of or triangle of service marketing. Now, friends, we are going to learn a very, very important area in service marketing, that is GAP's model of service quality. So GAP's model of service quality is propounded by a series of or a very renowned research persons in marketing, including the Parashuraman, and there are many other personalities too, like Berry, etc. So that is why the term here citation given, Parashuraman et al. 1985. So actually we have require a comma here anyway. So Parashuraman et al. 1985 here means et al. We already know et al. Et alia means others. So here meaning is that Parashuraman and many other others are in behind this GAPS model. So the others are included are A. Parashuraman, Valeria A. Saitmal, then Leonard Berry. So these are the others behind the GAPS model of service quality. So anyway, this is a service quality model. So the main feature of GAPS model of service quality is that in order to understand the service quality or in order to evaluate the service quality, the service marketer has to understand the gaps in service marketing. And in this model, there are 5 gaps in service marketing. So before that, please register in your mind, this is a model which has turned into a very good opportunity for services marketer in order to understand the integrated or systematic way of learning service marketing. So this is actually a very beginning part of service marketing. This model has given a shape for or systematic learning for service marketing. So anyway, that much importance are having for GAPS model. So the property of GAPS model is that there are 5 gaps in service quality. And these 5 gaps are classified into 1 consumer gap and 4 providers gap or service providers gap. So consumer gap means the gap in between what the customer expectation and what the customer perception. For example, my expectation by visiting a luxurious restaurant is that they will give a good service. But the actual perception or by actual performance of the service, my perception is that their service is very inferior. So this gap is known as consumer or customer gap. So actually this customer gap, the extent of customer gap means higher the customer or consumer gap means inferior the quality. Or if this gap is closed, then the reverse is the meaning. That means improved service quality. So by improving or closing the providers 4 gaps, we can actually remove the consumer gap. So this is somewhat tricky for now. Anyway, I will explain a little bit more. So this picture is actually the GAPS model of service quality. You can see there are 5 gaps. And this gap 5, that is difference between expected service and perceived service, is known as consumer or customer gap. So in order to remove this gap, the marketer has to eliminate all the 4 other gaps. That means by removing gap 1, gap 2, gap 3 and gap 4, the marketer are actually removing the gap 5 also. So eliminating all this gap means improving the service quality. Now I think you have got the clarity. Once again, by removing the providers or service providers gap, that is gap 1 to gap 4, actually we are eliminating the consumer gap. Eliminating the consumer gap means improving the service quality. And consumer gap means what was the expectation, what was the perception. If this gap is actually removed, then the customer is satisfied. For example, my expectation is good service and my perception is also good service, or by seeing or getting the service, I feel it is a good service, then this gap is removed, eliminated. That means expectation is met by the actual performance. So by eliminating this expectation and perception, actually the customer is satisfied. So in order to remove this gap 5 or customer gap, all the other 4 providers gap should be eliminated. So now we are going to learn all the gaps in detail. So first gap or the first gap we have to understand is the customer gap or gap 5. Please remember, customer gap is not gap 1, it is gap 5. So as we already said, you can see in the image also, the expected service by the customer is good care from the doctor. But the perceived service, or by getting the service, he may think, oh, the doctor is frequently visiting and disturbing the patient itself. So there is actually a gap between what was the expectation and the perception. And this gap is known as gap 5. So now we are going to learn another example in order to understand all other providers gap. So the first example I am going to show is that the customer gap here is that, or the gap 5 here is that, the expected service or expected service by the customer is, or the customer expectation was, he needs a fast and tasty food. So the junk foods offered by many of the restaurants are forming part of his expectation. But what the perceived service by actual performance or by getting the food product, actually the customer thinks the service is very slow and it is non-fatty food. That means it is more or less not a tasty food, and the service was also very slow. So here there is a widened gap. So this will result in a dissatisfaction of the customer. So that was customer gap or gap 5. So now we are going to see the providers gap, gap 1 to gap 4. So here I am giving an example. Here the gap 1 means the difference between the customer expectation or the consumer expectation and management perception of what the customer expectation. For instance, from the example it may be clear. The consumer expectation was that fast and tasty food, as we already see in the example. But the management or manager think that, oh, the customer need or requirement is give a healthy food. So there is a misconception of what the customer require. That is why the management perception of what the customer expectation, or simply what the manager think about customer's expectation. So there is a gap between consumer expectation and management perception, and this gap is known as listening gap. Why it is called a listening gap? Because the marketer or the service marketer was failed to know what the the customer expectation. Or if the marketer has conducted a research, it may not be failed to know what the customer expectation was. So here the manager think that he need a healthy food, but what was the actual expectation? Need a fast and tasty food. So here the misconception was because the marketer isn't able to learn or listen to the customer expectation. So this may be eliminated through an extensive research or by a simple survey or many other ways this gap can be avoided. So even though the gap 1 is eliminated, you cannot offer a service quality or high quality service. By just knowing what the customer expectation is not enough in order to provide a quality service. For that, we have to eliminate another 3 more gaps. So the second gap is gap 2, or we can say it as service design and standard gap. So here, the management perception of what the customer requires is correct, faster delivery of the food. Anyway, in this situation or in this example, the management perception of what the customer requires or expectation is actually understood by the marketer. But in order to provide that service, no particular standard is given. So service quality specification is not given. For example, in order to offer a faster delivery of food, there should be certain specification or standard like deliver the product within 15 minutes. So here there is no specification. So by just knowing the expectation of the customer, nothing meaning for that. So that is why the gap 2 is known as service design and standard gap. So service should be designed in such a way that there should be certain specification for services, like what time or what are the procedures should be done in order to provide the services. So a proper planning should be done. So even though this gap also eliminated, there came another gap, that is gap 3, the difference between service quality specification and the actual service delivery. Take the case of the same example. If the marketer has given the specification that the correct specification, service quality specification is that deliver the food within 15 minutes. But the employee was very weak person, or he has no skills at all, and their delivery was very weak. So in such a case, even though there was a good planning or specification or standardization were there, the actual service delivery was not done perfectly. So this difference between the specification and the delivery, actual service delivery, this gap is known as gap 3, or we can say it as service performance gap. So this is yet again another dilemma for the service marketer. So even though you offer or deliver a service in apt time, that is not enough in order to deliver a quality service. There comes the gap 4. What is the gap 4? Sir, it is the difference between the actual service delivery and the external communication. You can see in the image what I am saying. The external communication or the promotional messages shown a very attractive, visually appealing burger. But what was the service delivered or the actual service delivered? A very shabby type of burger. So what the promotional or advertisement has given by the service marketer is not met by the service delivery. So by just giving a promotional or very attractive advertisement may not give a good service quality. Why? Because service quality is dependent upon the customer satisfaction. And the customer satisfaction is dependent upon what the customer expectation. So by seeing such an advertisement, the customer expect much more. So by giving just a simple burger may not satisfy that customer. So in this way, the gap 4 is known as communication gap. Why it is known as communication gap? The advertisement or promotional messages given by the marketer is very attractive or giving a promise, but this promise is not met by the service delivery. So finally, all this result in gap 5 or the customer or consumer gap. Fast and tasty food was the expectation, but the slow and non-fatty or untasteful food was the offering. So, in sum and substance, remove all the providers gap means you are satisfying or you are removing the gap of consumer. That means the gap of expectation and the perception. So by removing this providers gap, and finally this will result in removing the consumer gap, this will result in satisfied customer, and this is actually the measure of service quality. So friends, we have to just recap the 5 gaps. As we already know, the gap 5 is the consumer gap, that is consumer expectation and perceived service. Anyway, leave that part. In order to learn these terms very fastly, you can remember the thing. The first gap is between consumer expectation and management perception of what the customer expects. There is another term also in between, but I limit that word, management perception. So here management perception means management perception of what the customer expectation is. So anyway, the first gap is consumer expectation, the difference between consumer expectation and management perception. And from this gap 1, the second term is coming at the second gap. So you can easily learn management perception is coming in the gap. So to the last term or word is service quality. So this service quality is appearing first in gap 3. So likewise, you can also learn very fastly. This is only a suggestion from my part. In order to learn or comprehend the things, sometimes the words may be missing. Anyway, that was my stake. So friends, this service quality gap model is very interesting. And I will show the model once again. I will project my image once again. So you can see how the gaps are coming. The gap 1 is coming from management perception of customer expectation and the expected service. Likewise, all gap 5 are given. The thing I want to again explain is that the external communication. Look, the external communication. The external communication, simply remember the communication or the marketing communication from the marketer in the form of advertisement or any other promotional material. So by giving a promotion, actually he is or the marketer is affecting the expectation of the consumer and also the consumer's perceived service. So that is why the external communication is linked with perceived service as well as the expected service. So this is very useful model for service marketers. Now we are going to learn another more important model, service quality model or service quality survey. Actually, this service quality survey is a outcome of the GAPS model or GAPS model of service quality. That means the Parashuraman and other researchers in 1985 introduced the GAPS model of service quality. And by their research, they do not end up their research. They also come up with a survey or a scale, service quality scale. That is why the term SCRV, that stands for service, and QAL, that stands for quality. So together, service quality survey. So this service quality survey is an outcome from their original model of GAPS model. So this survey is intended in order to evaluate the service quality of an organization or an industry. That means this service quality survey is just a survey or just a questionnaire. This questionnaire consists of 21 questions regarding 21 attributes of services. And these 21 attributes, we can say it as or classified into 5 service quality dimensions. And if the company or a industry is scoring high in these 5 dimensions or service quality dimensions, then we can say that industry or that company is good at their service quality. So in simply, service quality survey or service quality scale propounded by Parasuraman and other researchers means this survey is intended to evaluate the level of or extent of service quality of different companies or industries. So the thing we have to remember is that this questionnaire comprises of 21 attributes of services. And from these 21 attributes, the researchers has extracted 5 factors or 5 dimensions. Once again, we have 21 attributes. For example, attributes like the performance of the service, the effectiveness of the service, the timing of the service, like many attributes, 21 attributes are there. From these attributes, 5 factors are derived. These 5 factors together we can call as service quality dimensions. So this is the basic information regarding service quality survey, and it is very important for as part of NTA NET. So according to this survey, each attribute, we know that there are 21 attributes. For each attribute, 2 ratings should be done by the sample. That means if I am writing or completing the questionnaire given by service quality survey, then I have to rate 2 different ratings for each attribute. Why 2 different ratings? Because we know that according to GAP's model, the customer gap is based on the expectation and the perception. For instance, you can see in the image, there are 2 statements. Excellent firm in this sector will give you prompt service. So here there is a statement regarding an excellent firm. So this statement is regarding the customer expectation, because excellent firm will give a somewhat expectation of what the customer expect. And there is second statement regarding a particular firm or service firm, that is SYZ firm. SYZ firm will give you prompt service. So here the second statement shows my perception and the first statement give my expectation. So for each attribute, so what is the attribute? Prompt service. For each attribute, I have to give 2 rating. That means I have to give the expectation rating as well as the perception rating. So likewise, the survey is conducted. So anyway, the important thing we have to evaluate is the 5 dimensions in the service quality survey. The 5 dimensions are: first one, reliability, then responsiveness, then assurance, then empathy, and finally tangibles. So here reliability means up to what extent or the ability of a firm to cover their promise. That means what was the promise done by the marketer, or what services was offered by the marketer, up to what level this marketer can or the service provider can meet that promise. That is known as reliability. Then come the responsiveness. So responsiveness means willingness to help the customer. That is known as responsiveness. Then come assurance. That means the ability of the service provider to inspire or bring up the confidence of the end consumer. Take the case of a surgeon is offering a operation for a patient. Sometimes the patient may be scary. For that, an assurance should be given by the service provider, the doctor. So the doctor is giving an assurance that, okay, I will give you a good operation. You don't worry about that. And he may give words for inspiring you. So that is known as assurance. Also, the assurance means the service provider should have a prompt knowledge about what the service is. So then come the empathy. Empathy means the ability of the service provider to serve the customer as an individual. That means as an individual, the services provider has to handle the customer. That is known as empathy. Then come the tangibles or the physical evidence for the services. So that we have already learned. So these are the 5 dimensions in the service quality model. So from this statement, can you say which dimension is saying about in these 2 statements, what we have already learned? Excellent fame in this sector will give you prompt service. So prompt service or giving service as promised is somewhat related to the responsiveness of the marketer. So we can say it is regarding the responsiveness of the service provider. Now come another format or another variant of survey instrument for evaluating electronic services provider. That is why ES quality service. E stands for electronic, then S stands for service, then QAL quality. So together we can say electronic service quality service. So why this survey model was propounded by the same authors itself? Because as we know, in today's scenario, there are many e-commerce players or e-retailers in our scenario. So for them, the dimensions of services are very different. And we are not going in detail in today's live session regarding e-service quality. Anyway, please understand that in e-service quality, this quality survey model or this scale was propounded by the same authors itself, that is Parasuraman and other researchers. And this model includes 7 dimensions, 4 dimensions regarding the core services provider, and 3 dimensions regarding service recovery. So please understand that. So in this image, the 7 dimensions are given. 4 dimensions like efficiency to privacy deals with the core service, and other 3 dimensions deal with the service recovery. So what is service recovery? In simple terms, service recovery means if any dissatisfaction happened to a customer, how the marketer will handle that dissatisfaction. That is known as service recovery. So these are the 7 dimensions in the e-service quality model. These things are explained in our LMS platform. So please visit our LMS platform. So anyway, so friends, now we are going to the previous year questions. Before going to that, one question was asked based on my beginning slide, questions regarding who is known as boundary spanners. So from our discussion, I would say the boundary spanners are the frontline employees. Why the frontline employees are known as boundary spanners? Because they are working within an organization and they are making a link with external customer, or simply in a service, the service provider is the link between the organization as well as the external customer. So that is why they are known as boundary spanners, because the service providers or simply the frontline employees, these employees may include like the front office employees, the barber in a barber shop, the doctor in a hospital, like that. So these frontline employees are actually linking the external customer and they are working within the organization. That is why they are known as boundary spanners. So now you can give the answer for that first question. So moving to the previous year question. So this is a question regarding Commerce NTA Net. Happened in October 2020, shift 1. So the question is, some doctors charge patients for missed appointments because the service value existed only at that point and disappeared when the patient did not show up. Is an example of which one of the following 4 service characteristics? So friends, we have given a practical situation and we have to understand what the example is saying or what the practical situation is saying. And there is a clue given. This is regarding the 4 properties of services, and we have already learned the 4 basic properties of the services as well as one additional property of the services, that is lack of ownership. So anyway, let's recap the question once again. Doctors charge a patient for a missed appointment. So a penalty is given by the doctor. Why the penalty is given? Because the service value existed only at that point and disappeared when the patient did not show up. Simply, when an appointment given by the doctor, the patient not come. For that, the doctor has given certain penalty. Because why? Because the services is intangible, and we have already learned the services is produced when the services is produced itself, the consumption is taking place. So due to all this reason, we know that we cannot store a service, and that is why we had already learned that services are perishable. That means cannot be stored or retained. So from the example, it is very clear. It is saying the perishability feature of services. So why I am not saying inseparability? You may think it is inseparability. Inseparability simply means you cannot separate the service provider. You can say in 2 views. You cannot separate the service provider from what the services provide. Or you can say whenever the production of the service taking place, the consumption is occurring simultaneously. So this inseparability result in perishability. That means due to this inseparability, we cannot store that service as a product. So this is actually said about perishability feature of service. So it is very clear, it is not inseparability, it is not intangibility. Intangibility is just knowing, it is not felt, it is not seen, etc. Then variability means varying nature of services provider due to human is providing that services. So the answer is perishability. So the question was asked on October 2020, and just see services marketing question, how they are asked. So such practical questions are again expected. Now another question asked on July 2016, paper 3. Which of the following is not a determinant of service quality? And we have already learned the 5 dimensions of service quality in the service quality survey model. And just recap that model. Just see what are the 5 dimensions: reliability, responsiveness, assurance, empathy, tangibles. So the question was, you have to identify which of the following is not a determinant of service quality. So the question is straightforward. You have to identify which among the following is not part of 5 dimensions of service quality. So the options are: option A, reliability. Yes, it is a part of the 5 dimension, and it means that the promise is met by the ability of the services provider to meet the promise given by the marketer. And option B, responsiveness. That means how responsive to the customer needs and wants. Then option C, so responsiveness is also part of the 5 dimension. Then option C, sensitivity. No, it is not part of the 5 dimensions of the service marketing. So that is the answer. Then option D, assurance. Yes, assurance is actually a part of 5 dimension. What was assurance meaning? Assurance meaning was that the marketer or the service marketer is giving a confidence and inspiration for the end consumer in order to provide that service. So the answer is option C, that is sensitivity. Now come another question asked on July 2018, paper 2. Designing, the statement 1 states that designing a distribution system for a service, that means for profit or non-business context, involves to select the parties only through which ownership will pass. So the statement 1 says that designing a distribution system for service, it involves selecting parties only through which ownership will pass. So this statement is wrong. Why? Because ownership cannot be passed through, or services ownership cannot be transferred from the marketer to any other person. So this statement itself a wrong statement. Why? Because the lack of ownership itself a property of services. Then come the statement 2. The ownership channel for most of the services is long, quite complex because of inseparability characteristics. So the ownership for channel of the services is long, quite complex because of inseparability characteristics. So actually the channel of distribution for services can be get through the services marketer, but you cannot transfer the ownership of the services. Why? Because you cannot separate the ownership of the services provider, or you cannot transfer the ownership property of the services provider to the end customer. So from the statement, ownership of services through the channels is not possible. So statement 2 is also wrong. Then come the statement 3. Short channels usually mean more control on the part of seller. This is somewhat related to not the services, but related to just distribution. Here saying that short channels or a channel system comprising of minimum intermediaries means more control from the part of seller. This is right. Whatever extent of intermediaries are reducing, that much control the marketer has. That is why certain marketers are going for selective distribution, exclusive distribution, etc. So from this 3 statement, the question was you have to identify which among the following statements are correct or wrong. So from the statement, we can easily say the first 2 statements are wrong because they are related to ownership, and we know ownership of services cannot be transferred from the service provider. And statement 3 is right because it says that shorter channel means more control. That is right. So the option C is the right answer. That is statement 1, 2 are wrong, but the statement 3 is correct. Now there is another question for commerce students itself. The question asked on October 2020, shift 2 question. That means the evening shift. The question was, survey instrument used to assess the customer perception of service quality are called. So friends, this question was very, very tough one. Why? Because the question was asked to assess, from the options you have to identify which are the service quality or the customer perception of service quality. And we have already learned 2 models of service quality assessment by the customer. One is service quality survey method, and another one is e-service quality survey method. So there are many other forms of models of survey method in order to understand the perception of service quality. So anyway, from the options, it was very hard to understand which among the following is part of the assessment of service quality perception. So anyway, option A says set scale, then option B serve quality or SERVQAL, that stands for our service quality model. So this model is, as we already learned, is part of assessment of service quality. Then service performance or SERVP, so there is a spelling mistake. SERVPERF is actually the right spelling. Anyway, that option is also correct because SERVPERF or service performance model is yet again another model of assessment of customers' perception regarding the service quality. Then option D, DINSER or DINSER, that means it is also a service quality assessment model which assesses the service quality of restaurants or hospitality organization. So yet again, option D is also state. It's a part of assessing the customer perception of service quality. Then option E, retail service quality scale. This yet again a model. So this question was very, very difficult. Anyway, we can just recap once again. As the first model, service quality model, we have already learned. Parashuraman et al. In 1988 propounded the model, and we have already learned how the model works. Then come the dine serve or dining service scale states a model for evaluating the hospitality management industry's service quality. So yet again, that is also a model for evaluating service quality. Then service performance model. This model was propounded by Taylor and Cronin 1994. This model yet again evaluate the service performance. So the final one, RSQS, that is retail service quality scale, propounded by Dabolka et al. 1996. So this model evaluate the service quality of retail industries. So each this given model has its own properties. So actually the models propounded by the researchers in current scenarios are very wide. Many wide research are happening in service marketing, and many models are propounded by many other researchers in order to evaluate the customer perception of service quality. So this question was a bit difficult one. So from the options B, C, D and E, that means option A, that is set scale, is not a model for evaluating the customer perception of service quality. Other all models are included model. Then we have another question. This question was asked on November 2017, paper 2. The question is, this was a question for commerce students. So the question is, if a coaching institute provides some supporting study material along with teaching, then which one of the following service mix category would it be? Option A, hybrid offering. Option B, major service with accompanying minor goods and services. Then option C, tangible good with accompanying services. And option D, pure service. So here the questions or the options, from the options it is very clear that the levels of service marketing is asked. So here the example is, a coaching institute is providing supporting study material along with their teaching. So here the example itself states that teaching is their main service, and accompanying that teaching there is accompanying good. The good is, physical good is study material. So from this it is very clear that the option B is the correct answer. That means a major service with accompanying minor goods and services. So it was very easy question. And option B, major service with accompanying minor goods and services. Then come another question asked for management students in December 2019, paper 2. The question is, in service quality gaps model proposed by Parashuraman et al., gap 4 refers to what? So it was a straightforward question. You have to just identify from the options which option correctly state gap 4. And we know that gap 4, the final gap for the provider's gap states that there is a difference between the actual service delivery and the external communication. That means the marketer advertisements show a different form of communication and the actual service delivery was not up to that match. If there is such a gap, then that gap is known as gap 4. So remember, gap 4 means the gap between the external communication and the actual service delivery. So from the options, we have to identify which states the gap 4. So the first option is difference between the service level expected by the customer and the service level received by the customer. So expected expectation and the perception part states about the gap 5 or the customer gap. So option 1 is a wrong answer, wrong option. Then option 2, difference between service delivered and the promise made to the customer. So this is correct option, because the service promised, the actual service delivery, that means difference between the service delivery or service delivered. Here it means the actual service delivery and the promise made to the customer. Promise made to the customer is actually the external communication, what the company or the service marketer communicate to the target market. So the difference between the external communication and the service provider, this is actually known as the gap 4. So this is the right option. Anyway, let's look upon the other options too. Option 3, difference between the service specification adopted and the service quality actually delivered. So the service specification and the service quality actually delivered. So this is somewhat related to the gap 3. So yet again, this is a wrong option. Then option 4, difference between the service expectation and the service specification given by the customer. So this is the gap 1. And from all the options, we can easily say answer or the option 2 is the right answer. That is difference between the service delivered and the promise made to the customer. So friends, that's today's discussion for service marketing. So friends, you have understood how the service marketing question had come already, and many other practical level questions are expected from the part of service marketing. So keep learn well and do your work best. You can crack the JRF and NET. Thank you and have a nice day.